So, yeah, it's so good to have you all here. And I just invite us to take a deep breath. And where you are, feel and know the presence of Spirit. The presence of God right where you are. Where we are, God is. We open our minds, we open our hearts. We are grateful for this presence. And so it is. Amen. Thank you for coming. Could we all give our first names? I'm Tim. Little louder. Marty. I wanted everyone to be able to hear. Don Thomason. It's so good to have all of you here. Thank you. So we're going to go over some basics of unity teaching and history. And if you have questions, this is interactive, you know. So you can ask questions. Maybe there's something you've always wanted to ask. And there was a question just a little bit ago about what is the commitment. That is, if one wants to become a member, all 4 classes are the requirement for becoming a member. And like I said, not everyone can physically be here. So one person who was here in the second service had to go, but they're going to watch online. And I'll have a homework assignment for them. And there's also some people in other countries. And last year, we had a bylaws change made where we can have virtual membership. And so, like, I had a professor from Taiwan say, can I become a member online? And so it's also made possible for them. So we do have another microphone. So if people have questions, I'm going to have us use the other microphone so that people can hear the questions, if that's okay. And so we have a little bit of a PowerPoint here. And I don't know if we can darken that a little bit. Yeah, that's good. So this is one of the quiz questions, because there will be a quiz. So this is about Emma Curtis Hopkins, who is called the teacher of teachers. Now, the reason she's called the teacher of teachers is that she taught so many people and ordained so many people who became part of what became unity, or became religious science, or became divine science. She was their teacher. She's kind of like, in many ways, the person we look back upon as the teacher of all those teachers. So she taught Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, who are the co-founders of the Unity Movement. She taught Ernest Holmes, who started religious science and wrote Science of Mind. And religious science is now called Centers for Spiritual Living. She taught Nona Brooks, I believe, Melinda Kramer. Melinda Kramer was from San Francisco and one of the founders of divine science. So Emma Curtis Hopkins is called the teacher of teachers. She had been the secretary and editor for Mary Baker Eddy. Anybody know who Mary Baker Eddy was? Okay, who is Mary Baker Eddy?
She led the church. She was down in Los Angeles. She was very I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, she was the founder of Christian Science. Christian Science, which spread all over the world. It was, the mother church still is in Boston, but yeah, all over the world. And Christian Science taught that the truth of Scripture, of the Bible, and taught that there was a deeper meaning to the Bible. And that if people really aligned with Christ's mind, with divine mind, that they could get beyond the experience of illness, death, things like that. And so Emma Curtis Hopkins was her editor, but Emma Curtis Hopkins had a vision of going beyond what Mary Baker Eddy taught. And Mary Baker Eddy saw what she taught as being full and complete and should not ever be added or edited. And so they parted ways. In those days, Christian Science, that term was a broad brush. It included lots of what we call metaphysical teachers. Teachers who believed that there's something greater than what we see on the surface, and that when one reads Scripture, that there's a deeper spiritual principle at play. So Emma Curtis Hopkins started her own school and started her own, developed this way of looking at things, and so these great spiritual teachers came under her teaching and tutelage. So that's one of the quiz questions. We'll get to those in a little bit. And let me show you a slide of Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. There's Charles on the left, Myrtle on the right. And so these are the co-founders of the Unity Movement. And by the way, if you have questions along the way, feel free to ask. Any questions so far? Or thoughts? Yeah. Thomason, let me give you a mic.
Why would somebody want to be a member? What does that mean?
Oh, that's a great question. All right, thank you. Thanks for asking that. Why would someone want to become a member? When I started coming to a Unity church back in 1991, I asked myself that question. Why would someone want to become a member? And what I experienced and what I came to through that experience was that membership is a commitment I'm making to not only claim that I am part of this congregation, but that I am in some way wanting to help others in this community benefit by my presence. So being involved in what ways I can, and of course a person can do that without becoming a member. But for me, it was in part a symbolic act to signify my commitment level and wanting to declare my connection with this spiritual group that so much felt like home. It also made other things possible, such as like members can vote in membership meetings. Hello. Members can vote in membership meetings. Members can be on the board of trustees. There's a governing board for our spiritual community. Members, one needs to be a member before they can be a prayer chaplain. I mean, there are some things in the church that membership is required for, but there's a whole lot of ways that a person can be involved here without being a member. But for me, and I suppose that's an individual question for each person, but for me it became important to identify with that particular spiritual community, and I think it was necessary for me to make that commitment. I don't know if it was necessary for them. It was necessary for me. That's more of a response than a definitive answer. Does that make sense? And the question was, why become a member? What does membership mean? Thanks, yeah. So, yeah, any other questions or comments so far? I started talking about Emma Curtis Hopkins, the teacher of teachers, and then Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. Hi, and could you tell us your name?
Yes, sure. My name is Patricia Miner, and I'm really looking forward to this class. I've been sort of on and off involved in Unity for about 7 years, and wanting to become a member, but I am a performing musician playing in symphony orchestras, and our concerts are always on Sundays. So it's always been like, well, I can do 3, but I can't do the other classes, and how am I going to ever be able to have a chance? So thank you for making this available, and I understand that it's going to be live streamed, so if I can't come next Sunday, I could live stream the class.
That's correct. You can
Okay.
live stream it, and it will be
Perfect.
archived and put on our website.
Excellent.
So even if you don't have the opportunity to see it at the very time that we're having the class, you can
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
a later time. And like I said, there will be a quiz.
Okay.
Now, we'll do the quiz live, but that's one way that I know that someone has watched it. And I'll give out my email address. In fact, I'll write it up here right now. And so if any of you who are watching, who are live streaming, you can send to me the answers to the quiz to my email. And that indicates to me you saw it. So my email is Rev Tim, my first name, Rev Tim at Unity in Marin, like all one, no spaces, no capital, .org. So that's my email here. And you can send me answers to the quizzes, or if other questions come up for you. There's a lot going on through the week, so sometimes there might be a day or two delay, but I do like to answer those questions that people bring up about, unity belief, or sometimes it interacts with previous beliefs that they may have, and they may question things or wonder, how's this work? So good, thank you. Thanks for being here. And what do you play in the symphony?
Yeah, I'm a violinist. Yeah.
You what?
A violinist.
Oh, violin.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So, and I also want to just really thank you for weaving in so many different traditions. I'm also a Buddhist practitioner and have studied with Tibetan lamas. But I saw a quote by Thich Nhat Hanh where he said, "You can have 2 traditions, and in fact, they each enhance each other." And I really believe in that. So thank you for bringing all of that in.
That's true.
It's pretty exciting.
Thank you. Yeah, I like his book, Living Buddha, Living Christ. Yes, where he's synchronizing, looking at the commonalities. Yeah. Juliet, oh, no, you're just holding the mic? Oh, okay. All right. Okay. So we were talking about Emma Curtis Hopkins, the teacher of teachers. I'll show you her picture again. Whoops, wrong way. And teacher of Ernest Holmes, Melinda Kramer, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. So these different, divine science and unity and centers for spiritual living or religious science, those are all part of what we call new thought. New thought. A new thought about what? Well, a new thought about how to view spirituality, a new thought about how to view Jesus, a new thought about how we practice our spirituality. But really, it's not new. I mean, when I've studied some of the old, ancient Christianity, I mean, many of these beliefs were in circulation then. So it's not new, but it may be new to a lot of people during our time. And so here is Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. And they started this place. They used to meet on 9th and Tracy in Kansas City, Missouri. Has anyone here ever been to 9th and Tracy? All right, Don, you've been there? It's an interesting place, isn't it? It's where they developed their headquarters. It was Unity was an educational movement and a prayer movement. It was a place for people to pray, and they weren't, the Fillmores weren't wanting to design a church. They were wanting to design an educational prayer movement that would help elevate people's consciousness, and then they would go back to their own churches or traditions and bring that consciousness with them. That's what and to this day, the incorporation papers, the basis with the federal government for the Unity movement is as an educational unit, educational organization, not as a church. Yeah, so it goes way, way, way back. And so education is a big piece of the Unity movement. But they, in about 1928, started a place called Unity Farm. And this is a picture of how it looks now. This is Unity Village. It's its own zip code in the Kansas City area. It's its own municipality. It has its own mayor, its own sheriff, and all that. About 1,400 acres, pristine woods and wildlife preserve, a couple of lakes, golf course, and Mediterranean-style architecture. Kansas City is called the City of Fountains. The fountains here are at Unity Village are longer than a football field. Biggest fountain display in the Kansas City area. How many people here have stayed at Unity Village? Don and Cindy? Okay. I encourage it. It's a great place to visit. There's another view of it. And they have a hotel. In fact, I think I may show you a little video about it. There's an aerial view. I've been up on the top of that tower. It's really high. And you can see all over Kansas City from up there. Oops. All right, here is the covenant that Charles and Myrtle Fillmore wrote, and I'll read it because it might be hard to see. We, Charles Fillmore and Myrtle Fillmore, husband and wife, hereby dedicate ourselves, our time, our money, all we have and all we expect to have in the spirit of truth and through it, to the Society of Silent Unity. That's what they called themselves. The Society of Silent Unity. It was a prayer movement, an education movement. It being understood and agreed that the said Spirit of Truth shall render unto us an equivalent for this dedication, in peace of mind, health of body, wisdom, understanding, love, life, and an abundant supply of all things necessary to meet every want, without our making any of these things the object of our existence. In other words, we dedicate ourselves completely. Our purpose is to serve God and to serve this movement, but knowing, even though it's not the object of our commitment, everything will be provided for us. In the presence of the conscious mind of Christ Jesus, the 7th day of December, AD 1892, Charles Fillmore, Myrtle Fillmore. All right, so, Connect, are you able to help us play this video? Here's a little video about Unity Village.
Hit the next button.
All right, and that'll start it.
This place is called Unity Village. It's the home of the Unity movement founded by Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. A century ago, Unity was headquartered in downtown Kansas City, Missouri, and the Fillmores wanted a rustic vacation spot for employees. They found property 15 miles southeast of Kansas City and called it Unity Farm. Their son Rickard fell in love with the English countryside and Mediterranean architecture. With these as inspiration, he designed Unity Village with reptile roofs, arches, courtyards, and English cottages. More than 1,000 acres of forest, a natural bridge, golf course, and 2 large lakes, from which treated water is pumped to a tank at the top of Unity Tower, are some of the unique features of Unity Village. Several buildings are on the National Register of Historic Places. Our 9-hole par 36 golf course is one of the area's hidden treasures. Visit the bookstore and coffee shop, order a latte, and find a unique gift item. The state-of-the-art Unity Village Hotel and Conference Center was the first green hotel in the Midwest. In addition to offering guests a luxurious and peaceful place to stay, the conference center can meet the needs of groups large and small with a variety of seating layouts and the latest technology. Unity Banquet and Dining offers rental space for meetings, conferences, weddings, and receptions, as well as full-service catering. One of the most spectacular fountains in the Kansas City area, longer than a football field, is at Unity Village. The Bridge of Faith, Rose Garden, are the setting for dozens of weddings each year. Unity Village hosts numerous community events like 5K runs and group yoga. Unity Village is an amazing place to visit and explore. To learn more, call 866-348-6489 or visit us online at unityvillage.org.
All right, so that gives us just a little background on Unity Village. And any other questions so far? Any thoughts or questions? I wanted to just kind of give you a basic background as to what Unity Village is and what the Fillmores were about. Reverend Medora, I believe, is the one who's going to be teaching next Sunday. She's the associate minister here. And she may go a little deeper into history of New Thought, history of unity, and some of the principles. But today is kind of a general overview. I wanted to give a general overview so that those who are coming just to find out more about unity could, and those who want to go deeper will continue with these classes, and there will be 3 more classes, so each Sunday. All right, what's next? Oh, Unity Worldwide Ministries. So Unity Worldwide Ministries is the group that helps to oversee the ministries all over the world. And I'm on its board. So I am the liaison for our international work around the world. And then the previous minister who was here, Reverend Bill, was on the board for Unity Village World Headquarters. So it's 2 different boards. And there are regional meetings. So there are regions throughout the country, throughout the world. This particular regional meeting was in the Midwest, which is comprised of 11 states. Unity South Central region. And so, I don't know if you can see that person right there. That's Olga Lucia, my wife. And so it's a big region, 11 states, you can imagine. But this particular area, we're in the West Central region. West Central. All right, 5 basic unity principles. I want to get into some of our teaching. And I referred to that some. I talked about the first 2 principles in the service this morning. And these are verbalized in different ways, in different places, but they're all essentially true. Now, first of all, there is a book in the bookstore that's called The 5 Principles, and it's by Ellen Davenport. It's a modern look at the 5 principles, as we are seeing right here. Thank you. And so it's a contemporary view of the 5 principles. This is one way to see the verbiage for the 5 basic principles. And I believe if I click these, it goes to each one. Principle number 1, there is only one presence and one power, active as the universe and as my life, God the good, omnipotence. That's a central and core belief in unity. Some people, when they see that, are like, well, what about the devil? What about evil? If there's only one power and one presence, how do you explain the bad things that are happening? You know, I mean, that's a really good question, right? I mean, have any of you asked that question? Yeah? No, good. You haven't, but some of us have. Some of us have, like, really? There's only one power, one presence, but how come things are showing up in this way? But we know and affirm that there's only one presence, and that is God. That this presence is everywhere fully present. Now, that does not diminish our current experience in life. Like, if a person, let's say, is in an abusive relationship, it is an abusive relationship. They're having that experience. But it's not part of what is absolutely true. The absolute is God. The absolute is love, beauty, health, wholeness. But we do have these experiences in this realm, in this dimension. People have choices. And, you know, Ellen Davenport's take on this is very interesting in that book. But, you know, one can view it in many different ways. Are we here to learn something from that? Are we here to learn to stand up for ourselves? Are we here to learn who and what we really are? What is that all about? Unity affirms and knows that there's only one power and one presence, and yet acknowledges that there are still circumstances that happen in our lives. Unlike Christian Science, who would say, well, it's illusion, your sickness isn't real, don't even state any kind of diagnosis or sickness, don't go to the doctor. That would be the standpoint of Christian Science. Unity's point of view is, we know that we're having that experience, so we don't put someone down or ourselves down if we're sick or going through a difficult time, if there's some financial reversal or whatever, because we know that we are having that experience. We just know that there's a greater truth beyond that. And that's what we mean by the term metaphysical. Meta, does anyone know what the word meta means? Beyond, greater than, and physical. So beyond the physical, beyond the appearance. So in unity, we know and believe that there's always a greater principle at work. There's always something, and it's not always easy to believe that, right? When you're in the middle of it. When I was in circumstances in my life where I lost home, job, friends, career, marriage was circling the drain, previous marriage. Everything was circling the drain. At one point, I even lost my faith in God. You know, it's like, I mean, maybe I should say I couldn't tell God was there. It was just dark. It was just pure darkness. And you can learn a lot in the dark. You can learn a lot. And it was through that experience that I realized, oh, even in the darkness, God is here, even though I can't sense God. And so at that time, I really resonated with that whole story of the Easter events, with Jesus, where he was crucified and then put in the tomb. And I realized, oh, I'm in the tomb. I'm in the dark. What Joseph Campbell, in his hero's journey, at the bottom of the circle refers to as the abyss. I'm in the abyss. It's a great place to learn. It's hell to live in, but it's a great place to learn. And many people, when they're in that abyss, in that tomb experience, in the dark, they wonder if they're going to survive it. But as one moves through that, one is transformed. And that's what I found in my own life. It was through that experience that I found unity. It was through that experience that I developed a new career. It's through that experience that I recreated my life. So all through that, there's one power and one presence working, but when you're in the middle of it, it can be a hard thing to see sometimes. But it helps to know that that presence is always there. Marty? No, just talking.
Would you liken that feeling of darkness to depression, to having a depression?
Depression certainly can be like that, and like that dark place. And it certainly was a scary time for me. And I know a lot of people who go through that, who maybe aren't clinically depressed, but nevertheless wonder what is going on here. Everything maybe they've believed in seems wiped away. Maybe a relationship is wiped away. Maybe someone close to them has passed away. Maybe their finances seem very difficult. And so in unity, we acknowledge those things happen, but we still know that there's only one power and one presence. And since there's only one power and one presence, that means that presence shows up as each and every one of us. Our essence is God. Therefore, we are inherently good. This God essence, called the Christ, was fully expressed in Jesus. Not everyone here is Christian, in this church or in the unity movement. This is anecdotal. I don't have exact statistics. But just in getting to know people here, I would estimate that 10 to 15% are Jewish. There's a number of people here who are Buddhist practitioners. Other churches where I've ministered, there's been Hindu, Muslim, various types of Muslim. Unity agnostics, atheists. Like young man that I mentioned recently who came to me after the services and said, I love this place. I'm starting to feel that connection with all of life, that connection with everyone here. But he said, I don't believe in God. In fact, he said, I have problems with the word. So when you use that word, I struggle with it. Bless you. Yeah. And, it probably had something to do with past baggage and so forth. So I said, is it okay for me to come here even though I don't believe in God? And I'm like, of course it is. But he was tapping into this, and he tried to describe it. It's like there's an energy that connects us all and connects all of the universe. And there's some sort of presence of love. There's some sort of life principle living in all of us, interconnecting us all? There's some sort of inner source of wisdom? I'm like, yeah. Now, I did say at one point, that is what I mean by God, but I get it that you have difficulty with that word. So, sometimes in unity, you'll hear different ways of saying that. Any questions on any of that? So we see each one of us, since there's only one presence, each one of us is an outpicturing of that presence. Any questions, thoughts? Okay. The third principle, now I struggle with this. Now, I borrowed this. I struggle with it a little bit. We'll talk about it. We are co-creators with God, creating reality through thoughts held in mind. It's not that I struggle with the third principle. I struggle with the wording. And you might not. But that whole idea of co-creating indicates that, okay, well, let me just put it this way. Unity teaches that you are the self-livingness of God. And so it's not like you and God are creating something. It's God is creating it, and that divine presence living itself as you is that. So we believe in this sense of oneness. And at the same time, I am one who loves God, in love with God, has like this love affair with God. And yet, when some people hear that, they hear it as me saying God is something outside of me, and yet I know that I am one in that presence. I am that. I know, it's a paradox. Different folks see this in different ways. Let's see, where'd the other microphone?
I have it.
Oh, you have it? How did you get you manifested that, didn't you?
So I completely agree with Principle 3, but I have a question on words. I have an old belief that was taught to me a long time ago by a Buddhist that words have authority over thought. Where does unity stand on that?
Yeah, I'm really hearing that.
Words hold authority over thought, so you can think very purely in your mind. You can be creating for years what you're creating, but if you say something that's contradictory to what you're thinking, there's a belief that words hold authority over thought. And I don't know for sure if that's true, because lately things have been happening to me that I'm thinking that I haven't been saying. And I have caught myself contradicting myself verbally and catching myself and going, Does the church have any stance?
That's a great question. Thank you.
You're welcome. Let me get back to that.
Yeah, well, let me respond to it. Principle 4. Okay, so through prayer and meditation, we align our heart, mind with God, or express as the divine. Denials and affirmations are tools we use. Now, there's a lot of different ways to word this, but in one church where I taught, we said, so worry is a form of prayer. It's kind of in reverse, but it's a belief that something bad is going to happen. And many times with this principle, people talk about the power of mind action, that those things that we are thinking about, those things that we speak with our words, have great power. Now, I'm still ruminating and chewing on your question.
As am I.
Yes, as are you. But I will say this, that I have found that there's great power in aligning what I believe with what I say. And then, if I also act on it, there's great power in that. In fact, Gandhi thought that was the most powerful way to live, was to align your thought, word, and deed all as the same. That kind of integrity has tremendous creative power to it. Whether words have more power than thought, I certainly do believe in the power of our words. And in the Christian scriptures, Jesus would use certain words to create something, but it was also the thought that was behind it. So we do believe in the importance of our words. I watch what I say because I know what I say can influence my thought. I don't know if it's more powerful than my thought, but it certainly can influence it. So, for example, if I say, I am, and you can fill in the blank. Now, I am, throughout Hebrew and Christian scriptures and in schools of metaphysical thought, is the name for the divine presence and the divine that we are. I am. So I watch what I say after I say I am. And, we don't have to get rigid or weird about it or say to other people, oh, watch what you're saying. But there is power in our words. So if I'm feeling tired, more often than not, I say that I'm feeling tired rather than saying I am. Because I'm treating my mind, well, I'm pointing to my head. I believe my mind is more than this, but I'm treating my mind. That's what we mean by affirmations. Affirmations are a statement of truth to treat the mind, as are denials. I'll give you an example. This is from Myrtle Fillmore. Myrtle and Charles Fillmore went to a lecture by a spiritual teacher named E.B. Weeks. Charles Fillmore was not impressed with the lecture, but there was a statement in the lecture that Myrtle Fillmore, it just rang with her, and she practiced this denial and affirmation for 2 years. She had been told that she had terminal tuberculosis. And so she used this denial and affirmation, actually affirmation and denial. The affirmation is, I am a child of God. And the denial was, therefore, I do not inherit sickness. She had been taught since she was 5 years old that she inherited tuberculosis. She was taught that she inherited sickness. She came from a family where there was a lot of sickness. So she was taught that it was inherited. When she realized that God is her source, Father, when God is her source, how could she possibly inherit sickness? That became a very central truth for her. She would spend hours every day. She would have an empty chair beside her, representing the presence of Jesus, the Christ. And every day she would talk to the different organs of her body, asking their forgiveness for ever having called them sick or weak or impaired in any way. And she would do this work, and she would see and believed Jesus was there with her. And she would do this work. And after 2 years, there was no sign of tuberculosis in her body. That's kind of how the unity movement started. And then Charles was like, I think I'll explore this more deeply. I was a bit skeptical at first. That's how they got into that whole prayer movement. And so, there's power in the word, there's power in thought.
Yeah, I like what you said about Gandhi and tying it. I think I have to just catch myself a little more and make sure that I'm stitching perfectly in tune with what I'm trying to do. I think you answered my question. Yeah, thank you.
Good, thank you. Yeah, there's great power in aligning what we think and believe, what we say, and what we actually do. If all those are in alignment, nothing can stop us.
Right.
Yeah. Yes, Cindy.
I find that if I keep it in my head, I ruminate and I chew on it and I stew and I spew and get all upset. But once I verbalize, I'm careful of the words that I choose. And so my verbalizations begin to correct my thinking.
Yes. It's a treatment. Your words can instruct your thought.
Yeah.
Which is why we use affirmations and denials. Yeah. Good. Any other thoughts or questions on that? Oh, good. This is kind of an overview of the 5 principles. And principle 5 is through thoughts, words, and actions, we live the truth we know. We were just talking about that. How synchronicity works here. Thoughts, words, and actions. We live the truth we know. So we live this out. It's not, we don't believe that it's enough to just study this or just have some sort of internal experience, but to actually act on it, to live it out. And so unity is often called a practical approach to spirituality. Because it is based on the life and teachings of Jesus. Now, it's very eclectic. It includes traditions, as you've pointed out, from different world traditions, universal principles, which we believe Jesus articulated and lived. You know, it does have this Christian undergirding. And so we do see this importance of living it out in everyday life, and sometimes you will hear unity referred to as practical school of Christianity. So we're all students. We're all true students. We're all learning as we go through life. And we see it as being something that is practical, something that you can apply. And not everything that you hear at Unity, it may not all feel like it applies to you, or you may not understand it, or you may disagree, and that's fine. In fact, let me give an example from Charles Fillmore. Charles Fillmore was teaching a class. So he was standing there and he asked the students a question. And one very smart student thought, I will answer the question by quoting Charles Fillmore. Because he knew the quote that would speak right to the question that Charles Fillmore was asking. He thought, this will be good. So the student gave the quote from Charles Fillmore. And Charles Fillmore said, very good, I see that you can read and that you can quote, but I asked you what you think. Unity has always taught that this is a place for people to question, to investigate. We don't ask people to leave their brains at the door. And Unity tends to have people in this movement who are independent thinkers, who come from a rich experience of life. So what you will find in Unity is a great diversity of life experience, faith backgrounds, great diversity of thought. So while in Unity we teach these principles, you don't hear them articulated exactly the same way because we're not a creedal type church. We're not a closed-ended church. We're an open-ended approach to spirituality. Charles Fillmore said, basically that in no way was what he wrote a final word. He expected it to evolve and to grow because it's a movement of spirit. He expected it to change and grow and evolve. You know, of course, I say to people at the same time, but don't toss out Charles Fillmore until you thoroughly understand what he wrote. Because there's a lot of depth in what he wrote, which we have some of his works in the bookstore as well as other Unity writers. Another Unity writer that I highly recommend is Eric Butterworth. And he has a book called Discover the Power Within You. I'm going to abbreviate hospital abbreviations. Discover the Power Within You. It's a great book on accessing that divine presence within us and living it out in practical ways. Another really good book, and this is the first book Unity ever published, is Lessons in Truth. Oh, you got that one too. Thank you. By Emily Cady, and it has lessons on affirmations, denials, various things. It's a great work. And one of the things I've discovered about Lessons in Truth or Discover the Power Within You, it's up to the reader's level of consciousness. Any of us can learn from it. So the beginner, if you will, the baby can wade in it. It's shallow enough to wade in. Or it's deep enough for an elephant to swim in. Every time I've studied the books, it's like a different book. It's a different level because my consciousness is at a different level. There's a lot to these writings. Any other questions, comments? Yes.
One of the things that was really difficult for me being raised in my own Christian tradition, Mormon, is that there was this thing of we have the only truth. We have the real truth, and we will send missionaries around the world because our church has the ultimate, and just a sense of separateness, and there's just always a lot of pain for me around that. I've had a lot of experiences with Christianity and just my own, experience with Christ and, prayer and things that I really believe in it. So I remember attending a meeting and the Dalai Lama was there and he said, we will not have peace on earth until all of the world religions come together and really support each other, and that's when things will change. And so what I love about Unity is that it does create this space for inclusivity and for openness, and I just think that's where it's at. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Back at Unity of Wichita, a large family came to me. They interviewed me. They had me come over to their house and interviewed me for an hour and a half. There was another interview. They watched, they studied before they decided to come. And they were Mormon. And because they were looking for what for them, and we love and honor all traditions, but they were looking for, in their own lives, something that they felt would give them more life and more expansiveness. And they were from a hardcore Salt Lake City type family. And so that was a big thing. That's a big thing. But how cool it was to see them become leaders in the church. And we honor people in, different traditions. So we don't view things that, like, if people just came to Unity, they would know better. We see things like we honor the path that others are on, seeing that that path is serving them and helping them. And so I'm part of interfaith type groups and learn so much from different groups. And that's part of what I love about Unity, is that it is a combination of many different faith groups. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I always say until somebody comes back and says, you know what, the Presbyterians are right on.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are as many paths as there are people.
Yeah. Cindy was just saying there's as many paths as there are people. So we know that even with those groups that believe that their way is the only way, that there is truth in those churches and that people are experiencing beauty in those churches. And we also know that there are people who have come from traditions that taught that they were the ones that had the whole truth, that are like, questioning that. And, growing up, I was taught, well, you should stay away from this group. This group has some truth, and our group has the whole truth. So we can allow you sometimes to be with some of the people from this group, not from the people of this group. And it's like, I was trying to make sense out of that. How did we get the whole truth? And aren't there other groups who think that? And anyway, yeah. So thank you for bringing that up. Oh, 12 powers. We'll get to that another time. That's too small. Homework. What? Now you guys can do the homework right here. Aren't you lucky? And those of you who are love streaming, you're going to hear the answers. But this just tells me that you're like watching, right? So you can send your answers to me at, I hope you can read that, love streamers. It's Rev Tim, R-E-V as in Victor, T as in Tim, T-I-M at unityinmarin.org. Send me your answers. And, connect next time. Well, Reverend Medora is probably going to be teaching next Sunday. But I'd also like to have a way set up so that if people who are watching online have questions, they could send them in to us while we're doing class, like on Facebook or something.
They can actually do that now.
They could do it right now.
Yeah, we have a chat box in our YouTube channel.
Great. So we have a chat box in the YouTube channel, so if any of you have questions, you can ask us, and you're monitoring that connect, right? And because I really want this to be interactive, but let's look at the homework. Here are the questions. Who is called the teacher of teachers? Jesus certainly is, but who did we discuss? Emma Curtis Hopkins, because she was the teacher of Myrtle and Charles Fillmore, and ordained Myrtle and Charles Fillmore. She was the teacher for Ernest Holmes and ordained Ernest Holmes, religious science. She was the teacher of Melinda Kramer, one of the co-founders for divine science. So she's referred to as the teacher of teachers. She learned from various sources, but she was strongly influenced by Christian Science. She was the editor and secretary for Mary Baker Eddy until Emma Curtis Hopkins began to expand upon it. And Mary Baker Eddy never wanted anyone to expand upon her teachings. Not putting that down, but that's a fact. To this day, Christian Science churches must adhere strictly to what Mary Baker Eddy said. They can't add to it. So we're a little different system. Which of the 5 principles speaks of the divinity of humanity? 2. Yeah, the second one. Because that first principle, there's only one power and one presence. Then the second comes from that. And sometimes you'll see it more explicitly stated. You know, the way it was stated here is our essence is God. Sometimes you'll see it verbalized, therefore humanity is divine. But in any case, that second principle speaks of all of us being the outpicturing of that divine presence. Third, who are the co-founders of the unity movement? Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, quite a pair. And just in case you really start diving into a bunch of unity teachings, I want you to know that Myrtle Fillmore, you know, she was healed and whole and lived a long time, and then remarked to someone that she thought she could do more work from the other side. She did make her transition. Some of us at times have experienced her presence. And Charles Fillmore lived into his 94th year, and he had had a big injury to his leg. At times his hip was necrotic. It was a skating accident. And so a lot of his growing up years, he had these braces on his legs. One leg was smaller than the other. And after he started practicing these teachings, he would work with his leg. His leg actually lengthened. He went without braces, was able to get around without it. So anyway, they were the co-founders. Myrtle Fillmore used a powerful affirmation from E.B. Weeks to treat herself. What is that affirmation? Yes. Tom. Right. I am a child of God, therefore I do not inherit sickness. Thank you. Yeah, and others of you got that too. So that was kind of the beginning of the unity movement, that affirmation. When Myrtle Fillmore started using it in herself. So you could say, yeah, Myrtle and Charles Fillmore started the Unity Church, but it started with Myrtle. And Myrtle has some teachings, and some of those hopefully are available in the bookstore as well. Myrtle's healing letters. People would write in to them and request prayer, and she would handwrite a response to every single person who wrote to her, and she would pray with them. She knew the truth, and she would hold that truth with them. And that ministry lives to this day in the ministry that is called Silent Unity. Does anyone know the number for Silent Unity? Yes, Don? Yeah, 1-800, or you don't even need the one with a cell phone. 800-NOW-PRAY. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, rain or shine, holiday or not, 1-800-NOW-PRAY. Now here's a little additional homework assignment for you. You ready? And that's to call Silent Unity this week. Thank you for asking. What happens when you dial that number? When you dial 800 now pray, there are people on the other line called Telephone Prayer Ministry, TPM. And if they are on other calls and can't answer right away, what will happen is there will be some music and some affirmations. So it's just a good time to get grounded and hear the music and listen to the affirmations to get into the attitude of prayer. And then when the telephone prayer ministry person comes on the line, they say something like this: "Thank you for calling Silent Unity. How may we pray with you?" They don't say for you. How may we pray with you? Because they see it as a cooperative thing. They're joining with you in prayer. It's not someone from a hierarchy praying for you. You're in this together. And so you can tell them something that you're grateful for, that you want to express thanks for, or something that you would like prayer regarding, like it could be regarding health or relationships or decisions that you're making. And they can pray with you about that and know the truth with you. So that's a homework assignment. Now, Reverend Medora is going to be here next Sunday. So I need to remember to remind Reverend Medora to ask you how you did on your assignment to call Silent Unity. But I'll be teaching the third Sunday. So Reverend Medora will be teaching session 2 next week. I'll teach session 3 the following one. Now, this one is not a just clear-cut answer. What do you think makes the unity movement unique in comparison to other churches? Any response?
It's all inclusiveness.
It's all inclusive?
Yes.
It's all inclusive?
Yes.
Yes. Good. Thank you.
And that it's an educational thought and prayer foundation that can be taken into any other religion and
That's
evolve and
right.
spread it. Yeah.
That is kind of a unique perspective, isn't it? Thank you for raising that point. Good. Don, we can hand the mic back.
Embrace of revisionism.
Oh, would you explain that a little bit, Don?
Well, there, Charles says, I reserve the right to change my mind about any of this. This is not set in stone.
It's not set in stone. Thank you. Good point. That's a different approach, isn't it? Because a lot of traditions believe, okay, they got it down. Now, like I've been to churches where they've said, here's our creed. I mean, one group said, here is our creed. You look at it and see if you believe this, because if you don't, then, you can't be part of that group. And so one looks over the creed and, there's several times when you go, you think, I'm not sure about that, Charles Fillmore was pressured by some of his students to come up with a creed. What is it that we believe? What is it that you would say is our creed? What can we put up as our creedal statement? And he resisted that. He didn't want to do it, resisted it. Finally, he said, okay, I will write down a statement of belief. And I don't even know what it was. I will write down a statement of belief. However, I reserve the right to change my mind tomorrow. He believed, and Myrtle believed, in this is a growing, dynamic, spiritual life. It's not about being locked in concrete. Thank you. What? Yeah, evolution. Yeah, Cindy?
For me, unity removed the separation. I always felt like growing up in the faith that I was raised, like God was a puppet master and I was nothing but a marionette. And unity took away the separation for me.
Wow, good. Yeah, unity is not built on the idea of separation. It's built on the idea of oneness. And it's not to put any other church down. It's just a fact that many churches believe in separation. You know, when I was trained to work with Campus Crusade, ever heard of Campus Crusade? Okay. The first principle we learned is that we are separate from God. That was the first principle they taught. And they would use Romans chapter 3, verse 23. For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. They would use that. So there was a whole theology built on the idea of separation. Now, I don't put that down, but unity is different in that we start with original blessing. We start with the premise that there's only one presence and one power, and that's God. And in the book of Genesis, in the creation account, God looked at it and said, well, it's good. In fact, when humanity was created, God said that twice. It's like, whoa, it's very good. You know, we were created as good. The book of Genesis says we were created in the image of God. And yet, a lot of traditions have kind of discounted that. And so, yeah, we take a different start from the whole thing. It's not about separation. Any other uniquenesses you see about unity?
I was thinking how the whole concept of evolving. Last year I was involved in a group with Lynn McTaggart called The Power of Eight, and she is organizing people all around the world to actually get together and pray for each other in a group, and using the concept that unity uses, that we all are inherently, have the God within, and we can heal. And then she is scientifically, her book and everything shows how when we do this, we heal. And that our bodies are basically have the capacity to do this. So it's like people are now getting on the bandwagon of what Unity has been talking about all along, and so that's kind of exciting that it's, I don't know if they know they're validating it, but they are,
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and Unity's influence far exceeds its name. So many people have been influenced by the teachings of unity without knowing it. And you can hear it. You can hear it, and some people do know the connection. People like Oprah Winfrey does know that connection. And someone that she highly respected, as many of us do, Maya Angelou, was a Unity student. She took Unity classes. She was, when I listened to, his name's there. He's in Texas, in the Houston area, Minister Joel Osteen. When I listen to Joel Osteen, I hear these principles. It's in a little bit different dress. I hear these principles coming through. And, I found out that his father was good friends with Unity of Houston's minister. And it's like, these teachings, there's a lot of, have you ever seen the Daily Word? The Daily Word magazine? It's our daily devotional guide. You can get it in the bookstore, or you can subscribe online. You can get it on your phone as an app. Every day there's some affirming meditation and a scripture. Very affirming. There's been research to see who is our audience, who are the main subscribers of Daily Word. And two of the groups that popped up the most were Catholics and Baptists, which is great. They love the affirming word that is so practical in their everyday life. When my aunt was in the hospital, who's from a very staunch Catholic family, I walked into her hospital room, and on her nightstand was the Daily Word. And, what she asked me, she would call me Timmy. Timmy, what are you doing these days? Well, I'm a Unity minister. Unity? And she held up her Daily Word. She had made the connection that it was a Unity publication. But, she had been reading it for maybe 25 years or something. So there's a much bigger influence than those who are just in a Unity center or church. And that's what the Fillmores had envisioned, was helping people to move into a deeper consciousness, whatever faith tradition they're a part of. Yeah? Okay, any other uniquenesses that you can spot? It is very inclusive. So in Unity, if someone's from a different faith tradition, different ethnicities, different sexual orientations, they are more than welcome. They are celebrated. So that's different. There are some churches where people are tolerated that are considered to be different. They're tolerated, and it's like, well, let's give them time. Maybe they'll come around. But in Unity, they're actually celebrated. Again, it's going back to that view that there's only one power and one presence, and that presence and power is showing up as each one of us. So why wouldn't we celebrate how someone is showing up in their life? It's different. First time I walked into a Unity church, I was welcomed, I was loved, and I began to realize that it wasn't based on what I believe or don't believe. I was celebrated for just being who I was. They didn't care if I was coming from an evangelical or fundamentalist church. They just loved me. I thought, where have you guys been? So it's a very safe and affirming place in which to explore one's spirituality. So those of you who are love streamers, if you would send me your answers to these questions to revtim@unitymarin.org, then we can go and know that you have attended this class. And any other questions or comments at all about anything we've covered or about Unity in general?
I remember I went to a college homecoming.
Where is it?
I went to a college homecoming about 8 years ago, and the lady at the hotel that handled the breakfast concession in the morning, she adopted us as her kids, and she looked forward to us coming back every year. And one of my friends wanted to give her a subscription to the Daily Word, and she turned to me and she said, "Have you ever seen this magazine?" And well, yeah. And she had no idea that it was put out by a church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So these teachings get around, and I think because Unity isn't real based in creed and dogma, those teachings can go out and spread. And in fact, now this is not true of all Unity books, but Charles Fillmore books are not copyrighted. None of his books were copyrighted. I believe he did that on purpose so that People could copy them, do whatever to get those teachings out. So you can find editions of Charles Fillmore works that are put out by other groups other than Unity. Now, I'll say this, if you, and this is the only books that I think Unity does this with, if you get Charles Fillmore's books published by Unity, Charles Fillmore books, they're the only ones that I know of that they do this, the page numbers stay the same no matter what the edition. So people can have an edition from 1928 or it can be 1999. The page numbers will be the same so that no matter when people got the book, they'll always be on the same page when they're studying it in a class. If you get a Charles Fillmore book from another group, they don't necessarily keep to the same page numbering system. That's how you know the difference. But anyway, he never wanted to copyright his writings. He just wanted them to get out there, you know. It's such a joy to have all of you here. Thank you for staying for the class. Thank you, Love Streamers, for being part of the class. And I'd like to do a prayer as we close this session out. So as we take a deep breath, and we know the presence of Spirit, we know there is truly only one power and one presence. This presence is living itself right now as us. Where we are, God is. And in this presence, we are whole, we're at peace, and we are complete, and yet always growing. We give thanks, Spirit, and so it is. Amen. Amen. Thank you all for coming. Namaste.